Thank you very much. And thanks for all of you for sticking it out till the end of the day, especially in beautiful Florence when the weather is even more beautiful. But I want to explain to you why we created this project. The project is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. We are interested in addressing middle school reading comprehension and visuals in science, because lots of the children who are studying science especially are very confused or do not pay attention to what the visuals are saying. And many times, even on the tests, they see a visual, and the visual questions are harder for them to answer because they do not understand what the visuals are showing. And so we have attempted to build a software tool and have professional development for teachers that show them how to teach these visuals and how to also guide the comprehension for science topics. So I'm going to give you just a basic description of what our project is about. And we start with the reading side of things. When we looked at these data are from the United States, mostly from Texas, where I am, Texas A&M University. Oh, by the way, I have my whole team here, the visual person and my whole team that develops all the software and all the resources and does the professional development. And we're also co-sponsoring this conference. The Literacy IO you see is us. So back to this, the data that I'm sharing with you, when we look at all grade levels and we look at the different reading constructs that are measured, when you measure reading, how well someone is reading, typically people measure whether you can generate a summary, whether you can make an inference, whether you can understand the vocabulary, whether you understand how to do a gist or a main idea. These are the constructs that are measured in tests to see how well you comprehend the text. And what you see here is a graph that we have actually replicated for all grade levels from grade 3 to 12 that show that children just struggle immensely at summarizing and being able to identify the gist. So when you're trying to learn science, it's even more difficult if you don't understand what the key information is, because science is going to be all new language that you don't hear every day, what we call tier 3 vocabulary words, which are unfamiliar. Like you can have photosynthesis, you can have all these terms in biology, abiotic, symbiotic, things that children typically do not read commonly will show up. And when you're faced with that complexity on top of the reading complexity of the higher grade levels, if you can't figure out what's important in the text, you will not be able to comprehend the science text. So our method here is based on what we show in our classrooms, what we do in the textbooks, how we teach for comprehension, how we teach vocabulary, and how we also associate information from scientific text inside the brain. Those are very important aspects of gaining comprehension success. And then we also want to make sure that the children are very familiar with connecting the text with the visuals. You can't just teach to reading and then ignore the visuals, because there's going to be some very important information in the visuals that ties back to the text. And if you're learning anatomy, I mean, you don't teach anatomy in middle grades, but if you teach something about the muscle system for a middle school student, you want to be able to see the pictures, kind of visualize it three-dimensionally, and connect it to what's stated in the text. And so there's color coding in there. There's different types of aspect ratios that people present. There are arrows pointing to different things in the visual. All of those things are what makes it possible for someone to comprehend. So we want to make sure that these are the areas that we focus on in order to improve comprehension. And so what I'm saying here is that these are some of the areas that students struggle with, and that's why they don't comprehend well. And so our solution, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, is that visuals and the visual channel and the text are all going in through the same channel. And we want to make sure that we are able to show the kids how to read and comprehend and associate these things well in their memory. And comprehension happens in the brain. This morning, I was sharing a session on AI in education. And I think the more I sat there, the more concerned I got about us humans, because the most amazing thing about us is that we have a brain that can keep on doing amazing things. We do not have to rely on AI to tell us what we think or how to think or anything like that. We could possibly use some of the information, but our brain is really powerful and we need to train ourselves to do better with these things. So some of these techniques are part of that system that I'm still very keen on making sure that our brains, a little detour, before I got my navigation system and I would drive places, I remembered every landmark. I remembered every turn and I would never get lost. I got my navigation system in 2012 and I'm lost constantly now. My brain has lost its capacity to keep all those things. My husband always says to me, well, that's because those are not important. You don't need to keep it in your brain. No, actually, we do. We need to keep things in our brain. Anyway, back to our story here. We want to make sure that we are showing children and middle school students who are not necessarily children to age 12 to 14 to be able to connect their brains, make these connections, and hopefully these are the people who are going to become doctors or engineers or something like that. You don't want a doctor who's sitting there consulting AI before they can treat you. I hope they recognize your symptoms and can look at your muscle and know from their memory how to get the information and solve your problem. So what we are doing in our classrooms is we actually teach children how to look at captions, labels, arrows, cutaways, zoom outs, symbols, color keys, photographs, and even the periodic table. And then we connect the text information as well. And so visuals follow very predictable patterns, but some features are more complicated than others. So we want to make sure that students are paying attention to these things very carefully. And then we also add on a vocabulary instructional routine for whatever we're teaching. So whatever the science passages, we take a look at key vocabulary words and we pre-teach them with some graphics to show the students how to be familiar with them when they're reading it. Now, in science, there are some people who say that you can teach vocabulary after the instruction because they think that the children might be lacking some background knowledge in order to understand the vocabulary. However, if you're reading something and you don't understand the vocabulary, it's going to look like Greek to you. I guess in Italian, it's going to look different. So we want to pre-teach the vocabulary, and then we read or listen to the text, segments of it or the whole text itself. And this is done on the software as well as in the classroom by the teacher. And then immediately after that, we show the students how to impose logical structure on the text. And when I say how to impose logical structure, we use something called text structures, which is cause and effect, problem and solution, compare contrast, sequence and description. And so we ask the student if they're looking at the water cycle, what's causing it? What's the effect? What are some of the criteria that are actually promoting this water cycle? If you have animal adaptations, we're showing them how these animals are surviving their environment and thriving based on that. So we are looking to impose structure on the reading in order to generate the gist or the main idea. So we don't just arbitrarily read the whole thing and try to memorize it. Instead, we look at it from the lens of these cognitive connections, which are completely found in every scientific topic. If you go to the doctor today and you have cold-like symptoms, the doctor will have to diagnose whether you have COVID, whether you have sinus infection, whether you have the flu, or whether you have a common cold, because the treatment for each of those is going to be based on the root cause of your symptoms. And so that's why this is a powerful technique by which we show students to understand and comprehend science by first getting the main idea or the gist. And then, given the gist that you have, we ask the student to provide supporting evidence. So if we say, oh, there is this symptom happening, what evidence do I have from the text that this is connected to that symptom? So you are able to have an associative memory inside your long-term memory by making those connections about the text. So once the student is able to generate the main idea, they extend the main idea to what we call a summary. That summary has those supportive evidence to go with it. And then the last step is to do inferencing, because sometimes not everything can be stated in the text. You have to go beyond what's stated in the text, and that requires inferencing to read between the lines or extend your knowledge beyond what's stated in there. A frequent example is if you teach about one particular animal, then you can actually infer to other similar animals, or you can infer beyond to animals that are completely different. So if you talk about the black spotted moth that started disappearing in London because they didn't have the adaptive capability to survive the coal that was depositing on the trees, then you can infer about other animals that also might have been affected by the coal deposits on the trees. So what was happening with the spotted moth was it was mostly white with a few black spots. But once they had the coal burning all over Europe, in England, the trees got a whole black all over them. And when the spotted moth sat on it, all the birds recognized it because it was white and it stood out. If it was a black moth, it wouldn't stand out and it survived. And so that type of thing. So once you actually know about that the white spotted moth, then you can infer about other animals that might have been affected by that type of change in the environment. So these are the 6 steps that we follow in our comprehension routine. And then we move directly into how to teach the captions in here. And so I have with me my amazing graphic designer who actually did all of these designs for us. And what we also found in the textbooks and the resources that were being used, and we've looked at these types of things in Austria, in Malta, and also Germany, it's very common that the designers of the diagrams do not do a good job capturing the color coding necessary. Instead, they make it look cute, and then the student actually doesn't learn from that. In this case, we were talking about a comparison between metals, metalloids, and non-metals. And here is a chip that goes in your computers, but we have a cutout of it, and it has captions in here that directly explain what's going on with it. And the call-outs have direct meaning to what's stated in the text. We also made sure we use the correct coloring. This is gold because we want to make sure that it actually withstands a lot of heat, and the pins and so on. So we spent a lot of time designing these captions to go with the text that they're reading. The next one is a whole bunch of arrows. This is related to the water cycle. Arrows can be used to describe motion. It can be described forces. By the way, in the force diagram passage that we were reading, there was a picture of some military person standing in front of a helicopter, and it didn't say anything about the forces acting on the helicopter. Instead, the image was something completely different. And one of the reasons I got into this work was there's some research done by a gentleman by the name of Voss from the University of Pittsburgh, where he says that a lot of the images seductive details. That means they're in there to supposedly engage the students, but they don't help them learn. They're just cute pictures to try to get them excited about learning, and it is completely worthless. And then when they don't understand, then the adults in the room are complaining that the students didn't look at those pictures correctly. Well, if you drew a picture that doesn't even make any sense, or gave them instructions about the picture that doesn't tie into the text, what do you expect is going to happen? They're young kids, right? So this is why we do these kinds of things. And I just wanted to share some of those examples. And these are like about tectonic plates and how they move and the different areas of the earth. All of these things are very carefully designed. And if you want to see any of these samples, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to send it. And then we have color coding. And so the tectonic plate one is also very interesting because it shows the plates, but the students actually think that Europe is sitting on one plate, that America is sitting on one plate, that Asia is sitting on one plate. No, there are multiple plates under each of these things. And you're probably thinking, she's crazy. Nobody thinks like that. No, actually, most of these kids do because they don't understand. They think a plate is a plate. So we want to make sure that we capture where these plates are falling, how they are moving, and how they're causing earthquakes. All of those things matter for their learning. And then here's the example about the muscles and the tendons that I was sharing with you. There are lots and lots of images in biology texts that require a great deal of detail and also the correct colors. We don't want the blood to look like it's just red or the muscle to be, just cutely colored. We don't need that. We need the student to understand what this would look like if they cut into my hand right now. That's what we want to capture. So that's the kind of work that Ashley did like enormously. We worked with actual biologists and actual physicists to build these out very particularly. And the labels and the symbols and everything else in between. And then there's all these wonderful photographs that people include. And all of them are also very distracting to the students, especially the students who do not comprehend well. They will pay attention to the wrong thing in the image. That's the sad part about it, because they're drawn to something else. Here, it's about this, the grassy area that captures something. Instead, the students may be paying attention to the reflection in the pond. That, oh, that's a very good pond. It's very clean and it's reflecting. Well, that's not the point of it. This is something different. So we want to make sure that students are paying attention. The solar system is a common problem for most students. They can't keep track of what's coming first, what's coming next. Poor Galileo is probably turning over in his Italian grave, but the sad reality is that they can't figure out why the Earth is rotating and all these kinds of things. So we want to make sure that we're able to capture all these things in a good way. We did make multiple videos that actually showed some things that were animated, but not all of them, because we want to make sure that they're able to understand the 2D image first before they can get into 3D and all kinds of rotating pictures. So those are some of the main features of our systems. And then we focus on the actual memory connections that are promoting these things. I want to make sure that we are able to give you some detail about the most recent research we've done with this. We've conducted a study with about 18 classrooms that was just completed last fall. And we have found that the students who learned with this method outperformed the other students with very strong effect sizes that were statistically significant, with effect sizes of like 0.8 and 0.9. And these are students from very complicated neighborhoods that typically wouldn't have very good instruction. We provide the instruction online, we provide the teacher with this instruction, and they're able to get additional support from this as well. And so that's how we've built it, and we make sure that we have the data to support that this type of instruction is working. We hope that that paper will be coming out soon, and maybe I'll be back in Florence next year to present that results in great detail. But that's basically the gist of my presentation. How do we make sure that reading and the visuals are connected very well, and we make sure we address all of them very, very effectively. And if you'd like to see more, we do have some of the bookmarks that I'll let Amy hand out. These are some of the resources that we give to the students. Feel free to take one. They're indestructible paper, actually. And so you can't even break it if you try. And these have all the text structure-based instruction. Our website is literacy.io. And we have all of the resources, including many of our instructional videos there. If any of you are interested in collecting more information, I'm happy to give it to you, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much for this very nice talk.